From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, welcome back to another show, and we have a special guest that we teased on previous episode.
Thank you, Steve, and it's great to be here as always, and definitely looking forward to having this guest on.
Excellent. So with us today, we have Donovan Monday, and one of the reasons that we had talked about Donovan in the past is his involvement with HETMA and the approved programs. So welcome, Donovan.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for being here. So Donovan's with West Virginia University, and we always like to start with giving a little bit of a background on our guests, talk about your experience in the industry as well as relevance to programming, and we'll take the conversation from there. So just give us a little bit of context.
Absolutely. I started probably in the AV industry in the early 90s and doing integration work. I was a musician that worked for a local music store that were starting to delve into integration work for houses of worship and clubs and those kind of things. I got into programming DMX lighting and doing systems for larger houses of worship. And that kind of snowballed into getting more into the weeds on how do we make these, user proof in a lot of ways. We started back in it was in the late 90s when they started doing things like basis and things like that with QSC, where they were doing RS-232 control of amplifiers and limiting and graphical designs for those kind of things. And so that's where I kind of got started in with the programming side. I went and worked for a government contractor for a little while, working for one of those three-letter government agencies, and was doing VTC work for them in a secure SCIF, programming things like polycoms and Tambergs and bridges. And they got into the conference room game where they were wanting some control over the conference rooms. So we started doing those build outs. And then coming to West Virginia University, I was brought on initially to do things like digital signage and build out the distance education and telemedicine pieces that we needed, and get into doing smart classrooms. At the time, they were an AMX shop, and we converted everything over to a different vendor, and have been kind of going forward ever since then, just trying to build out the best possible user experience that we can.
So what are some of the typical challenges that you face when it comes to programming and control, either on a day-to-day basis or when you're looking at planning out your projects?
I'm going to probably say something unpopular here. And I am not a huge fan of the gatekeeping that companies do on their programming side of their products. I understand from a business standpoint why that's necessary, for their integrators and for their, there are some proprietary things that they deal with that obviously needs to happen, right? But for the most part, for us as end users and as tech managers, especially in higher ed, and especially where, and I've talked about this many, many times in the past, and James can attest to this, where I am geologically in the world. Like, we don't have integrators that are, downtown, or we don't have integrators that are even in our city, in our town where we live. So we often wait a long period of time for someone to have time to come, to us to fix something. So the whole idea of being in-house integrators and doing things ourselves and doing the programming ourselves and doing all of that is built on necessity. We have things that break. We can't be down 2 weeks because no one can get to us in that rotation. So the gatekeeping that goes on in order to become that, I call it the 13th level wizard to, to drop a screen and to turn a projector on is just, it's unnecessary, I think, for a lot of things. And people have tried the stopgap efforts of things like AV framework and, those kind of, the user can program these things, and graphical, programming and stuff doesn't quite get it done what we need to have it do. So there's got to be some give and take there with, how this works for end users like us. Not everyone's going to want to program their own stuff. Not everyone, needs to. But for those of us that do, we shouldn't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, one, to get certified, and two, go through what seems to be like, months and months and months of training to just get to where we need to be.
I appreciate that. And I although you say it's an unpopular perspective, I'm sure that there are many others that are sharing that and are in similar shoes. And I think you provide really good justification for it. James, do you want to add on to that?
Yes, to a point. I mean, Donovan hit a lot of good points there. The one argument, and I'm normally not on this side of these things, but I can see the argument being, oh, we shouldn't spend $1,000 to get certified. I kind of disagree. I mean, yes, we shouldn't spend thousands of dollars to get certified, but we should get certified. We should have the doors open to us to get those certifications so that we're on the same level as an integrator, because it shows that we can do it, that we have, and a lot of us can do it better. But you don't want to take away from the people who actually got certified, because they could do their job too, and you don't want to knock that.
No, I don't necessarily mean that. And I think that the people like me, like, you take the, Crestron offers all the way up to like, a certain level for free, right? And QSC does the same thing for free. And Extron will bring you out for a certain level. And then you have to, at some point, you have to buy in to go forward. And I think that that's what, for those of us who have already done everything that's offered for free, and then we have to go to our management and say, hey, look, I got to spend $3,000 to go to the next level, and that's not even going to get me certified. That's going to take me to the next class that will allow me to open up the next version of it. It's going to be probably in the neighborhood of, $9,000, $10,000 before I finally get completely certified. Well, we have an integrator that's got a certified guy. Why are we certifying you? Just call him when you have a programming issue.
Yes, and I mean, that's a good point. Like I said, the cost needs to be looked at, especially in the higher ed side, and not just the cost. Another thing that I've actually had conversations with manufacturers about, and Steve, you can probably chime in on this too, is higher ed is kind of unique in a way. So when I go for programming, I don't need, nor do I care of how to turn on a microwave across the country. So I don't need
or pull shades down, or
yeah,
a lot of the things that are offered in those suites.
yeah. I'm not saying that the integrators who are doing home programming, or they need to use that. Maybe have a different track of certification that is for residential and higher ed, break it out that way and make it a little more targeted to the vertical you're doing. Because like I said, like I don't care about programming a microwave, or I'm sure people know this one, but the riverboat. I'm not going to say what that is, but many people who have gotten certification in, like, I'm in higher ed, I ain't doing a riverboat. So why do I need to, if I need to learn how to do your product? Why is it for a certification? I gotta do this 40-hour project on a riverboat when I just need to focus on classrooms and education. So I definitely think manufacturers need to revamp their target audience with their programming and make it a little more directive of who's going for it. But also with that said is, I do think manufacturers need to protect their product and making sure that the people who are programming it for the need that they are programming for know what they're doing, because they don't want a black eye. And I use this example in higher ed, big time. How many times, and I'm not picking on them, I just know they're a big company, but how many times people go, well, Crestron sucks because the touch panel is not working in a classroom? It may just be a programming error. Has nothing to do with the Crestron product. It was bad programming. So I think having the Crestron and the AMX and the QSCs, making sure that whoever is working on their products are actually capable of working on it is a good way to keep their brand for being reliable. But I do think, like Donovan brought up a good point, is it needs to be more affordable for higher ed folks who, especially in the rural areas who don't have integrators that they can knock on their door and say, hey, what's going on here? Or, cause we can't wait 2 weeks. We got a 10-minute window and classes start when classes start.
And I will say, and we can talk about this a little bit more later when we get into, real programming stuff, but the racks that we were building 5 years ago are completely different than the racks we're building today, right? They've been completely simplified out. We have a much less rack space taken up by gear. And the type of gear we're putting in is completely different than what we were doing 5 years ago.
I agree with that, but I also think it depending on where you're at. Because back when I'm on the East Coast, our rack builds were very slim, very limited gear in them. Here where I'm at now, we have a lot of gear in our racks. That's something I'm actually, once we are fully got the day-to-day operations under hand and we're working, that's something I'm going to be investigating and see if we really need all that gear that we have. But so again, 2 different locations, completely different rack builds.
And what we've said in HETMA from the very beginning is that we all do the same thing differently, right?
Yes.
The idea that you're prevented from being able to do programming is a little new to me, so I must admit, and I come at it from a very different perspective. So I think that that's really interesting, because if you think about it from any other type of coding, you have access to the language and you write your code, and the restrictions are a little less limited in terms of being able to have access to it. It may have a cost associated with it, but the proving of your qualifications is not necessarily there. So it's very
Right.
interesting.
Because if you're programming something in C++ or you're doing something in Python or in anything like that, there are tons and tons of resources for that out there, right? We can, tons of resources. But if you're going to learn something in C# or you're trying to do something in, the proprietary language that they've built into this, this control system, that's, yes, Reddit has some, there are definitely resources out there, but you got to dig for it.
Mhm.
I agree with Donovan. Like someone as me who I've been teaching myself Python, I can easily hit the Googles and be like, hey, I have this problem. I can get 30 websites who give me different examples of what to do to solve that problem. If you do an AMX, you do a Crestron, you do an Extron, it's like crickets out there.
I have a question for you guys about that in particular. I was thinking about this podcast and talking to you guys in particular, but everyone's buzzword this last month has been, AI, right? Chat GPT and all of the different things that are out there. How long, or do you think that at some point one of these companies, and I think the first to market is going to be the one to kind of grab the share of it, whoever it may be, but a text generated programming language where a user can go in and say, I want it to do A, B, C, and D, and it spits out a program for you on the other side, on a text-based level. Is that something that you think would work, or you think that is, on that level, with things like AV framework and those kind of things, you have those drop down lists and you can do a lot of things in there. But I'm talking about a truly text-based, I need it for, drop the screen after 30 seconds, turn the projector on, start up with input 1 and, definitely be able to build something out that way.
So I have thought about this a lot, as you mentioned. There's AI has been the buzzword lately, and I'm taking it this kind of two front. One, can that happen? Can someone just go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, write me this program"? Yes, but what is spit out if that person doesn't know? It could be wrong, and they load it and actually cause problems.
Oh yeah.
There it's a bigger issue. You have to verify it. It's just a tool, just like any tool out there. If you use it wrong, you can cause problems. And the second path I was going to mention, and this is one of my gripes with the AV industry as a whole, is if you look at even let's take the companies that are doing C# and Python, they put their little spin on it. So it's not true Python. It's not true C#.
Well,
Because,
sure.
we got to make it a little special, make it a little different. And I think they'll do that too with this AI generated thing, is they'll put their little spin on it. So, you have to go through a special, almost a walled garden or gatekeeper, Donovan mentioned, to try to actually do what the regular IT world allows freely.
Well, you see that in the Linux world all the time. They do Linux and spins of Linux and Android, where you have the basic tools in Linux that are there, but there's always a little tweak to that spin that you have to know about. So
I think what
I mean, your IT is more open source than AV, I feel.
oh sure.
what's interesting is of what you were describing, Donovan, sounded a little bit like voice control to me. So it sounded like you would tell the system what you wanted, and then it would somehow translate it into an instruction set.
So the Alexa controlled, or the Hey Google control for classroom sets, I think would be we've looked at it. We've looked at some doing something along those lines. But honestly, in our environment, in a higher ed environment, I think it's not going to ever work the right way. One, we have way too many different dialects and there's not a standard language taught in higher ed, right? There's not or used in higher ed. There just isn't. And because of the proximity to everything else that's going on campus, you could have that room firing on and off all day long because it's hearing something down the hall, or, I know there's way to limit, and I know there's things that you can do, but we know from a higher ed standpoint that those mitigations hardly ever work the way they should.
Sure. I don't know that I would put that in front of students.
No, no. And even, in especially in a medical school where I work, how do you mitigate, when you say something and it's always listening, a single word can trigger an action. You have to get the phrasing right, and you have to do things that are certain ways. It's just, I think what most people want these days, and what most of our customers are wanting, and I call it the big red button effect. They want to walk in, they want to hit the big red button and everything work. And that's it. The touch panel sometimes scares them because they look at it and go, well, there's some buttons on it. I don't want to mess with it. Can you just turn it on for me? Or, I don't need the cameras on or anything like that. I just need the computer on. I don't need anything else. Okay. And so, we call it the big red button.
Yeah, in the commercial world, we call it the CEO control.
Yeah.
Or something.
And then you have the other people, I call it the Tony Stark effect, where they've seen something on TV or they've seen something in a movie and they're like, can I have that hologram in front of me and I can move it around and deal with that? Like, we've had so many people ask about, 3D projection or things like that, where they want to manipulate something in real time, and having those discussions where, like, well, that doesn't exist yet. I'm sorry. Well, it does, but it's not what you think it is. It's very interesting.
I think that's one of the huge challenge as a programmer in higher ed is we have that wide thematic of our users. We have those, and our classrooms have to work for everyone. We have those users who just want to come in and have the system work. They don't want any bells and whistles. And then we have those on the edge of the pushing the boundaries of technology, and we want to be there. Like, I know I want to do cool things, but then you like, all right, that's 1% of our use case, and we can't divulge resources to it, and we can't have complicated program for that 1% when we also have another 1% who only just wants the easy button and have everything work, and then your 98% of the people are somewhere in between those two extremes.
Yeah. And our programming, at WVU has gotten to the point where it's, on the touch panel, it's a big start button. There's nothing else, present at that point. The start button's there. You get a couple options. Then if you start digging down the rabbit hole, you can get complicated with it. But that's only for those users that are wanting to go down that rabbit hole. And if you just want it to come on and do the basics, you don't have to ever touch it again, once you hit that big start button. So, the UI is different now than it was before, where you had a bunch of, soft buttons on the side, and you had a touch button, and you had volume controls, and you had, knobs and whistles and stuff. Now it's most of the time, it's literally just a single button push, and the room is available at that point.
And I don't know if you noticed this, Donovan, and it has changed a lot since I noticed this, but this was back in my student worker days, and it really made me step back and really think. So we had at that time, we had a mix of systems. We had where I was a student worker at, we had some rooms that actually had a big square remote. And if you wanted the PC, like turn the projector on the PC, you had to hit like option B4 or something on the remote. And then some rooms had a new interface where you launch a website on the PC, and you want the system on, you hit on. If you want the PC, you click PC. And I was showing a faculty member that web interface, and they're like, this is too confusing. Give me the remote. I'm like, wait, option B4 is easier than hitting on. And he's like, yes, because I know option B4.
Yeah. And I think too, like, and you bring up a great point, is that something that we've worked really, really hard at in our environment is standardization, right? We talk about program standardization, we talk about UI standardization. So even though our rooms might be physically different, and they might have different components, and they might have different This room has 5, displays in it, and this room has a projector. That UI, those first couple page flips on that UI is exactly the same. So it doesn't matter if you're teaching in our big classroom, our lecture halls, our what they call interprofessional education spaces, which are the movable tables and the multiple displays and all that, combined room mode things that they do, or just our standard small classroom. That UI, those first couple page flips on the UI are the same.
That's a great point there, and we've talked about standardization a bit here, and I think that providing that comfort level and the ability for somebody to feel like they can walk into any room and have a similar experience makes all the difference, at least what I've seen in the past. I think as we wrap this one up, and I think we touched on a lot of good things to follow up on. The one question that I would ask, kind of going back to the beginning about programming, is there a need for more of a universal resource for training, and do we need to kind of separate the manufacturers from the ability to get trained up in doing control programming almost regardless of a language too, right?
I think I'm going to step into HETMA at the moment and say that that working with our manufacturer partners, building out an education suite that makes sense for higher ed is imperative for us moving forward. I believe that we have the resources and the people and the dedication available to make a real difference in how those trainings are developed and given and deployed to our members and to higher ed in general. And partnering with Avixa and getting, higher ed a better seat at the table, I think is in the next couple of years, we're going to see those programs developed out and be a lot more readily available to everyone.
Yeah, I hope that it sets a blueprint too for not just higher ed, but for everybody to benefit, because I think
I hope so. I hope it does.
I've said, and I'm a little biased, but this is organic, that I've been a big fan of HETMA for a long time, and I think that the association's doing really great things for the industry. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's kind of going to tease into our next episode. So stay tuned for a little bit more about HETMA. Just to wrap this one up, Donovan, how can people learn more about what you're doing, get in touch with you, and continue the conversation?
You can find me on the socials on Twitter. It's D Monday WV, and on LinkedIn, Donovan Monday, DA Monday Music on Instagram, or if you want to just you can always just find me on search West Virginia University and type in WV Donovan Monday, and I'm the only one, so my email comes right up. So
excellent. Thank you. Thanks for being on with us.
Thank you.
James, how can people get in touch with you and learn what you're up to?
As always, you can find me on the socials, Twitter, AV_James King, LinkedIn, a little bit active on there. Anything with HETMA, I'm there. And again, you Google me.
Oh, yeah.
Me.
Yeah, you can also join HETMA and type in my name and message me there as well. Or if you're in higher ed and you want to join the AVIT Slack channel, you can always find me there as well.
Yep.
Always good stuff. And the HETMA community is really cool. So it's open to anybody to join. So please check that out. HETMA.org is the basis for it. And then there's a community website. For me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. You can also reach my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. But what's most important to us is you continue to listen and check out Ask the Programmer. We're doing a lot of interesting things moving forward, and stay tuned for the continued guests and more relevant topics that are speaking to the needs and desires of this audience, all centered around programming and control. And if you have a request, or if you have feedback, please reach out to James or me. And if you'd like to be on our show, please also let us know. And you could watch the show on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast player through both Apple and Google Podcasts. And with that, this has been Ask the Programmer.